Hey, good afternoon, everybody. At least afternoon in my time. Thank you all so much for participating in the GA meeting. This is a very exciting time for us. We are hoping to engage our chapters to highlight a lot of the things that you guys are doing around the country. Thank you all so much for joining in. This is sort of an opportunity for us to sort of test out this model of doing things virtually to create a virtual village. So we have a good lineup of people who will be talking about different things, sharing with us. We're going to get started with Dr. Huberta Jackson Lohman, our president. She will start us off with some words from her perch as the president. We'll do some chapter training and chapter development, and that's going to be led by our directors, the leadership development directors, Dr. Sharon Bethia and Dr. Erica Jennifer. We're also, and I'm really excited about, we're going to hear some highlights from a few chapters who are doing some amazing stuff around the country. So Dr. Barry Cartman, who is the president of the Chicago chapter, is going to highlight some of their interventions that they have going on there. Dr. Marva Robinson, the president of the St. Louis chapter, is also going to talk about an amazing intervention that they're working on. And then Adiba Dieterville, who is the Midwestern regional president, vice president, also coming from the Bay Area to highlight some of the things that they have going on. So this is going to be a great opportunity for us to learn and share and hear about just the amazing things going on around the country. We are one organization, we're one family, and we're all working these issues from our various backgrounds, from our various places, and focusing on those specific issues, but all with a common goal for the liberation of our mind, liberation of our people, and really to move forward. As you all know, we're in very challenging times right now. So it's very important that we stick together, that we hear from each other, that we support each other, and that we share with one another. And so on behalf of the General Assembly, we wanted to provide this opportunity and this space for you. So without, I'm Donnell Barnett. I'm the General Assembly Chair. That's it by way of my welcome and introduction. Just a few key notes on the website where you register. There's also an evaluation form. So once we are done here, I'd like for you to go back there and fill out the evaluation so we can improve this and get better at it, and hopefully to do more things like this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our president, and she will take it over from there. Thank you so much. Mama Huberta, you're still on mute. You're still muted. Still muted. Move around your mouse, and at the top of the screen, you should see the microphone icon. You're still muted. You're still muted. Sorry, everybody. We apologize for the technical challenges. Give us just a second. You're still muted. Hey, I have you on the phone now. So we're going to figure out a workaround. I have you on the phone, so everyone should be able to hear you. Ma'am? Because I can't, I need Say again? Yeah, I can hear you. No, I can hear you on the phone, so I'm going to have you speak. Okay. Sorry, I do apologize. We are running into some challenges. I'm going to go ahead and put her slides on the screen. Hi, sorry, we are trying to work it through as Murphy's Law would dictate. We did pre-checks and that sort of thing, but there's always some last minute things to come along. Just to kind of note a few things before we move into the next stages. We have a couple things going on right now. We are in the middle of a fundraising campaign for the organization, so you probably have seen some emails and things like that to honor our 50th anniversary campaign. So this is going to be an opportunity to raise funds for some exciting initiatives that we have going on coming out of the organization. As well, I hope you're gearing up for the chapter, gearing up for the convention in Oakland. That is going to be very, very, very exciting. We'll be going home in a lot of ways. So we're really looking forward to seeing you there. There will be some big initiatives that we're hoping to roll out over the next over this year, 2018. And we're looking forward for our chapters to really be a part of that. So I am going to check back in with Mama Huberta to see if we are good to go from there. And if not, then we'll move right into the chapter training with Doctors Bethia and Jennifer. Stand by, please. Thanks.
Okay.
You can speak from now.
All right. Can I go ahead and begin?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hotep family, and Happy New Year to you. I do apologize for all the technical difficulties. This actually worked when we were doing this yesterday, and for whatever reason, things did not want to work this morning for me. I hope everybody's getting off to a great start this year. This weekend, across the country, we are celebrating the life, the contributions, and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There are many valuable lessons that we can learn from the legacy that he has left us. So as we think about his contributions, let us consider the model of service, dedication, and commitment to justice that he provides, and how we can learn from that and apply that to our task as healers in our communities throughout the world. Next slide, please. In this brief presentation, I want to share with you where we are, where we need to go, and some of the challenges that we must address as we move forward. I want us to keep in mind one of the quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. Next slide. First, I want to express gratitude to our organizer, Dr. Donnell Barnett, who is our General Assembly Chair. He has done phenomenal work in terms of laying this out and organizing this for us. A tremendous amount of time has gone into this, and I think he is really to be commended for making this platform available for us. I also would like to offer my gratitude to our board of directors because they have spent many hours in service over the past few months. We have had numerous meetings. We just had one last night for several hours. And over these past few months, we have dealt with a number of challenges and crises. And we know that there are many ahead of us. But what has enabled us to survive is the level of cooperation, support, sacrifice that has been demonstrated. So I want to thank my board of directors from the bottom of my heart for your leadership, for your insight, for your guidance, and for your commitment. Next slide. This is a particularly significant moment in the history of ABPsi as we have entered our 50th year of existence as an association. It is only fitting that we pay homage first to our founders on whose shoulders we stand for their courage, their fortitude, their vision, and their faith. Stepping out from under the umbrella of ABPsi was no easy feat. And remaining an autonomous association is still challenging. Our founders, our past presidents, and many of you who have served in various leadership capacities over the past 50 years are to be commended for holding together this holy union in spite of the many struggles that we endured and because of the great sacrifices that we have made and the spirit that we have displayed. We are living at a most uncertain time in the history of the United States. We are experiencing threats of war. We have experienced tumultuous natural occurrences. The country is chipping away at the social supports, which were always at best minimal. We are dealing with gentrification in many of our urban areas, continuing to experience epidemic violence in our communities, police brutality and the criminalization of Black men and youth, the dismantling of our public schools and miseducation, and of course the absence of a viable economic infrastructure in our Black communities. And to add to that, recently we are dealing with the continued denigration of our Haitian as well as our African brothers and sisters. Most recently, we issued a position statement in relationship to the enslavement of our African brothers and sisters in Libya. These are only some of the conditions that we are facing and that are certainly influencing ABPsi. Next slide. Confronting the challenges that we have before us requires a strong Okay, am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So as I was saying, confronting the challenges that are before us requires a strong, financially stable, and viable institution. We must build the infrastructure that is needed within ABPsi that will enable us to face the fierce, harsh winds of white domination and terrorism. There are few institutions in our country that represent and defend African humanity and honor our commitment to the ever-evolving project of affirming our African consciousness and defining our reality. As the theme of our 50th anniversary convention suggests, building for eternity, we must be able to plan for 7 generations and beyond. To do that, our collective, coordinated, and cooperative efforts are required. Next slide, please. If we value ABPsi, if we are committed to the mission which our founders and ancestors established for ABPsi, then we will do the work that is necessary, just like our ancestors did the work necessary to secure freedom from chattel slavery and make the sacrifices that are required to sustain our viability into the next century. Not just for us, but for our people. Our Fiscal Affairs Chair, Dr. Carolyn Moore, and the members of the Fiscal Affairs Committee have developed a fundraising plan that you have been introduced to. It is designed, with our collective support, to generate $300,000 in additional revenue for ABPsi. Let me offer you a scenario. If just 300 of our members each raise $1,000, we would reach our goal. I invite you to take this challenge on, not just for us, but for our people. It is time for us to begin to establish the programs that are needed in our communities to create the policies that will contribute to our health, to our healing, and to our self-determination, Kushishagalia. We must develop collaborative relationships within our communities where we offer our knowledge and resources to solve the problems that we are facing. Furthermore, it is time for us to be the credentialing institution and for mental health interventions with African people. To accomplish these tasks, we must augment our infrastructure and increase the revenues that we generate, and that depends on each of us. The strength of ABPsi also relies on our ability to cultivate a cadre of leaders committed to our mission and goals who will continue to carry the baton over the next 50 years and beyond. And today we will have a presentation from the co-chairs of our Leadership Institute who will address that. Jegnership is one of the critical functions of ABPsi. Each of us in professional roles is needed to serve in this capacity. I strongly encourage our chapters to provide leadership in the development of innovative Jegnership initiatives to support our students and early career professionals. For those of us who were fortunate enough to have had Jegnas, we recognize how valuable they were to our personal, professional, and career development. We now have instituted a Jegnership committee as one of our national committees, and Drs. John Chambers and Jessica Terrell are providing leadership with our Jegnership initiative, along with our Student Circle Jegnership chair. Several years ago, under the leadership of past President Dr. Daryl Pasogwe-Rowe, the HBCU initiative was established. One of the efforts that emerged from that initiative was the development of a draft of standards for the teaching of psychology. The General Assembly further developed the standards, and now Drs. Satira, Streeter, and Janice Moody are leading this initiative and taking it forward. For the past 20 years, we have been hosting the majority of our General Assembly meetings at HBCUs. Now, we are seeking to take the next step and to form an HBCU consortium composed of chairs of psychology, faculty, students, and alumni. It is time for us to share our knowledge, our skills, and our resources with these institutions and to build stronger, more supportive relationships with them. If you are a faculty member, a chair, or a student at an HBCU, I hope that you will join Dr. Streeter and Moody in building a relationship with and developing this collaboration between the HBCUs and ABPsi. In my presidential acceptance speech, I introduced the idea of the development of an online community. The purpose of that community is to make the knowledge and skills that ABPsi has developed over the past 50 years available and accessible to schools, colleges and universities, social service agencies and businesses, and to offer online credentialing education in African-centered psychology to professionals both in and outside the field. Conversations are now beginning with a couple of school districts that could potentially serve as launching sites for this initiative. As members of ABPsi, your involvement in the development of online courses that could be offered to parents, teachers, students, social service, and mental health professionals across the country is needed. It is absolutely essential that ABPsi become more visible and actively engage in our communities. Several chapters are deeply immersed in their communities and offering invaluable advocacy, education, and intervention on behalf of the Black community. More of these kinds of initiatives, some of which will be shared with us shortly, are needed. In each community where there is a chapter, there should be an ABPsi presence in the community. That can range from providing training and workshops for professionals as well as community residents, adopting a homeless family, implementing the emotional emancipation circles, and many other initiatives. I would like to commend Dr. Cheryl Grills, who's been doing a phenomenal job introducing the emotional emancipation circles to individuals across the country and the world in collaboration with Noah Aird, who is the founder of the Community Healing Work, which developed the emotional emancipation circle model along with our input. Next slide. This past September, members of ABPsi attended the first Pan-African Psychology Conference held in Durban, South Africa. During this conference, we further cemented the relationship between the Forum on African Psychology and ABPsi through our Pan-African Global Initiative, which is being led by Dr. Wade Nobles. Many of our members made presentations to this august body, and now, through the leadership of past President Dr. Cheryl Grills, a survey of our interest in research and collaboration with our continental African brothers and sisters and those in the diaspora is being undertaken. We invite each of you interested in research and collaboration to complete this survey. And for information about that, you can be in touch with me. I would also like to commend Dr. Erica McGinnis, who has successfully launched international chapters in England, Canada, and the Caribbean. We are excited about having their participation in our 50th anniversary celebration. We will not only celebrate, but we will also reflect on our achievements, our areas of needed growth and improvement, and our future. Next slide. These are just a few of the highlights that we have undertaken over the past year and more. None of this can happen without your participation and support. And none of this has happened without that. As I close my brief remarks, I want to draw on the wisdom and inspiration of Dr. Martin Luther King. Next slide. Take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Next slide. Dr. King reminds us of the importance of courage. He says, courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles. Cowardice is submissive surrender to circumstances. Courage breeds creativity. Cowardice represses fear and is mastered by it. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politics? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? The conscience asks the question, is it right? Next slide. Let us continue to remember our mission, to liberate the African mind, to empower the African character, and to enliven and illuminate the African spirit. And as Leela Watson says, if you come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is tied up with mine, then let us work together. Last slide. And I would like to close by pulling down Harambe. And so I ask that you would join me in pulling down Harambe 7 times, holding your fists up in the air and saying Harambe, and we will do that 7 times. Harambe, 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 Harambe. Hey. Thank you. Asante Sana.
Thank you, Mama Huberta. We appreciate that encouraging and inspiring words. We're going to transfer now to Adiba Dieterville. She will be speaking about some of the initiatives going on in the Bay Area chapter. So we're very excited to hear about that. And I'm going to turn it over. Adiba, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Good, good.
I'm going to pull up your slide here and you'll be ready to go in just a second.
Okie doke.
And you're live.
All right, beautiful. Greetings, everyone. So again, my name's Adiba Dieterville, and I'm currently a doctoral student at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And I'm a lifelong member of the Association of Black Psychologists, specifically the Bay Area chapter. I'm currently serving as the Western Region representative on the national board. And I'm really, really excited this morning to share with you a project that I have the privilege of creating and facilitating. The name of the project is the Community-Based Models for Black Mental Health, Black Psychology as a Professional Gateway Project. And this project has this long name in part because of its funding source and its outreach goals. So next slide. This image is from our chapter location. We host our chapter meetings at the West Oakland Youth Center. And I wanted to open the presentation with this slide because it demonstrates how impactful the local chapter has been in collaborating with the local community. And I also love this quote from Dr. Nobles: "You are the never-ending," oops, my screen went away, so let me pause here. All right, thank you, Donnell. Donnell is in the captain's seat, so he's in charge of the slides. So as I was saying, the slide, this quote from Dr. Nobles, "You are the never-ending totality of possibility," it speaks to me, and I have it on the front of my journal and planner, and every day I start my day with this quote as a reminder. And so in this image, you'll see Dr. Adisa Anderson leading a drum circle as part of one of our workshops. Next slide. So the project began as an outgrowth of another project, the MHSA, which is the Mental Health Services Act, which is a grant. I believe it's a federal grant that was initiated to provide support services for folks who have mental health diagnosis to enter into academic programs. And so my university, CIIS, received one of these grants. And at the time, about 2 years ago, I was the program coordinator for the Master's in Counseling Psychology department. And my colleague and I really wanted to infuse African-centered psychology into the curriculum and allow Black students to have access to the knowledge of African-centered psychology and make a connection to ABPsi. And so we created this 2-year pilot project called the MHSA ABPsi project. And through that project, I was able to bring a cadre of students from my university across the different departments and program focuses to the ABPsi convention and take them through a year-long process of learning about African-centered psychology. And so once that project ended and that grant ended, we wanted to continue the work that we started. And so we applied for a mini grant through the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, which we refer to as OSHPD. And through that mini grant, we were able to expand on what we had begun in the MHSA ABPsi project. And again, the project itself is based out of my university, California Institute of Integral Studies. And part of the requirement of the grant was to partner with community-based organizations. And so immediately, my first intention was and is to partner with the Bay Area chapter of ABPsi. So our lead partner organization is CIIS, and we have 3 partner community-based partner organizations: the Bay Area Association of Black Psychologists, Rafiki Coalition for Health and Wellness, and the HHREC, which is the Health and Human Resource Education Center. Next slide. So the project goals were multiple. The first goal was to reduce the stigma associated with mental health. And what we mean by that is both for folks who are going into the field of public mental health or mental health, to reduce the stigma associated with that. Oftentimes people of African descent who enter into the mental health field receive pushback both from community members and family members around their interest in the work that they're doing around mental health. We also wanted to encourage people of African descent to pursue careers in psychology and mental health. We wanted to increase knowledge and application of Black African psychology, to expand mental health workers to include community healers, artists, faith leaders, and family members, to provide leadership opportunities, and ultimately to create a community of healers. So in this image, this is a photo from our most recent workshop. And you'll see a little bit about who all of those different folks are that are in this photo as we go through the slides. So next slide. So the project was made up of 4 main components. First was a leadership cohort. And we wanted to, as I said, based this on the model that we had created for the previous project. And what made that project so unique was that we had selected a group of students, and now we were selecting a group of community members to really come together as a cohort of learners. And we wanted this cohort of learners to be able to get experience of JEGNA process and a learning process where they formed a community to work together and learn together. And so a part of that cohort, leadership cohort process required for us to put together a selection process and an application process. And for our recruitment process, we use a series of information sessions. So this image that's to the right is one of our information sessions. And the way in which we would go about recruiting people for the cohort was word of mouth. We use social media. We advertised at local schools. Advertising meaning if you were a student at other schools, we reached out to other schools and asked for you to share this information. And so we recruited a variety of people from all of those folks that I mentioned earlier. So we have faith leaders, we have community members, we have doctoral students, master's in counseling psychology students, we have licensed clinicians, we have folks who are artists and healers and writers, musicians, all different types of people from all different walks of life who are part of our cohort. We have 20 members of our leadership cohort. We also, the second component of the project is a workshop series. And so we wanted this, it's a year-long project. And so we selected 5 topics for the workshop series and then went and recruited presenters for each of those topics. Those topics are based on, somewhat based on the 5 program concentrations that we had within the Master's in Counseling Psychology department at my university. And so as we move forward, you'll get a chance to see what those 5 topics are. We also wanted to have an online component because it was a statewide grant, we had the opportunity to reach out beyond just the borders of the Bay Area. And so we have participants both in our leadership cohort and also participants from the general public that come through and participate via online using Zoom webinar. And we also have an online classroom space using Google Classroom. The final component is a one-day symposium. And this one-day symposium will be later this year. It'll be actually in March. And the symposium is being created by the leadership cohort. So again, the 4 major components are a leadership cohort, a workshop series, online access, and a one-day symposium. Next slide. So the cohort itself, when we were doing the recruitment process for the leadership cohort, these are some of the things that we stated that we were looking for in our participants. So we wanted them to come in as part of this cohort so that they could become a part of a select group of healers by participating in a dynamic 7-month learning process that includes 5 workshops on Black psychology and the field of public mental health. Cohort members will have an opportunity to learn about Black African psychology, share existing knowledge and wisdom, and co-create a one-day symposium for the broader Bay Area community. And cohort members will also receive a stipend and a certificate of completion. Next slide. In order to become a part of the leadership cohort, the person needed to identify as a person with lived Black experience, have an interest in Black African psychology, an interest in entering the field of public mental health, and an interest in providing healing support services. And these basic requirements are really important because of a number of reasons. One, it was very important to me that the people who were a part of the cohort, because we were wanting to create a real sacred space, had a lived Black experience. And I was very specific in using that language because oftentimes people will say, well, I'm, this and that, and my cultural identity is such and such. And so one way to address that was, if you identify as someone that has a lived Black experience, and then that sort of settled that. Also, what was important to us is that they had an interest in entering into the field of public mental health. And what we meant by that is because the grant came through OSHPA, the Office of Statewide Health Development and Planning, it is in fact a workforce development grant. And so that was one of the components that was required from the grantor, that we were doing outreach to encourage people to come into the field. And then this final point around having an interest in providing healing support services really speaks to the notion that just because you're not a counseling psychologist and you don't have a master's degree and you're not a licensed clinician and all those things, which are vital and important and much appreciated, you are able and capable of providing healing support services at a high level. And we wanted to acknowledge that and to honor that work. So next slide. So if selected to be a part of the leadership cohort, there were some basic requirements for participation. One, they had to be able to commit to a 7-month learning experience. So the grant started in October and it runs through March. The actual project itself runs from June to June. The grant itself, rather, runs from June to June, but the workshop series and activities of the leadership cohort run from October to March. They must be able to attend monthly workshops and the symposium. They have to commit to 3 to 4 hours per month, which includes 2 to 3 hours for the workshop, a 1-hour symposium planning session, and also be able to participate in the symposium, which will be a full 6-hour day minimal. Next slide. Leadership cohort members are compensated if in a variety of ways. They receive a total of a $250 stipend for participating, which breaks down to $25 for each workshop they attend and $100 for participating in the symposium. They will receive a certificate of completion, and they're actually building a resource manual on Black African psychology. So at each workshop, they're provided with handouts and other materials. And so over time, as they attend the various workshops, they're building a manual on Black African-centered psychology. And we provide light refreshments at all of the events. And one of the bonus aspects of being a part of the leadership cohort is because the 50th annual convention is being held here in Oakland, cohort members will also have an opportunity to participate in the planning of that convention. And so folks are really excited about this. And this is one of our recruitment bonuses. Next slide. So I mentioned the online component. So we utilize Zoom webinar, Google Classroom, and various social media platforms for our outreach and promotion of the individual workshops. The little screenshot that's showing here is from an event on our Facebook group, our Facebook page. And I really wanted to highlight that we had 259. This had just gone up. This workshop was held right around the Christmas holiday, and this went up. It was posted about 2 days. We were already at 259 people interested in the event. And so, excuse me, I'm getting a little drink of water. And so we are really excited about the interest in this. And I also selected this little screenshot because it features a number of people that some folks may recognize. So the first person in the photo there is Danielle Drake. She is a core faculty in the Expressive Arts Therapy Department at CIIS. Next is Adisa Anderson, our beloved Adisa. He also was one of the co-presenters for this workshop. In the center is Dr. Hicks. And the last person on the screen is Lanisha Cately, who serves as my assistant for the project. And so we had a really good, wonderful turnout. And that image that was on the very first slide is from that workshop. So just speaking a little bit more about Zoom webinar and why we selected that. Let's go to the next slide, because I think I speak to it a little bit more on that next slide. Yes. So in the image in the upper right hand, those are some of the faces from the Zoom webinar. And I wanted to speak a little bit around why we chose that as opposed to Google Hangout or Zoom conference function. The webinar function within Zoom gives us a lot more control and flexibility around being able to do screen share and interact with the various participants that are online with us. And it's been a learning, to say the least. At each workshop, we strive to get a little bit better at the technology side of it. So in that small image in the upper left-hand corner of the screenshot, basically what we do is we have 2 to 3 computers running at the same time. So I use my personal iPad because it has a reverse back-facing camera and sort of do on-the-scene images. So I walk around the room next to the speaker so that the folks who are on the Zoom webinar can see what's happening in the room. And it also allows the presenters to be able to move about the room and not have to be stationary in front of a computer screen with the camera facing them. And so I'm moving around the room, and sometimes we'll have an assistant that'll do it, and so that the online participants can see that what is actually happening in the room. We also have a stationary computer that sits with the PowerPoint presentation or keynote presentation if the presenters have slides. And so we have someone that staffs that and advances the slides and so forth. And then sometimes we'll have a third person, or that the person who's on the stationary computer will also respond to the chat. And so when people ask questions or raise their hands and so forth, they can be in real time participants within the space. So the Zoom webinar function has worked really well for us, and we're getting better and better at it over time. The image on the lower side of the screen where it says classes, that's a screenshot from our Google Classroom. So those are images from the 4 workshops that we've already done. And in the classroom space, which is the larger image, we're able to place the presenters as the teachers, and the workshop participants can sign up as students. And in that classroom space, we record the Zoom webinar, and we're able to upload the recording from that so people can go back and watch it later. We put our handouts in there. There's a place for folks to continue to have discussion around the topic. So it becomes an ongoing dynamic space for each of the workshops for people to continue to engage with one another and have conversation. Next slide. So our workshops are What is Black African Psychology, Into Psychotherapy, Liberatory Practices and Community Mental Health. Those are our primary workshops. Coming up next month, we have a panel discussion on careers in public mental health, and then we're closing out with a one-day symposium on Black psychology. So next slide. So these are the flyers from each of the workshops. So I launched the series by doing What is Black African-Centered Psychology? And this one really focused on giving participants a foundational understanding of what African-centered psychology is. And I do this through the lens of ABPsi. So we start off by talking about the ancient Kemetic roots of African-centered psychology, and we go all the way through to various epistemological thrusts within the field, identify some authors that write from various perspectives. We talked briefly about some of the key authors within the field of Black psychology, and you can see a sample collage of some of the books. So it's very, very focused on members of the Association of Black Psychologists, the publications that have come out of ABPsi, and a framing and a grounding in the association and our perspective on African-centered psychology. Next slide. The next workshop, Into Psychotherapy, also was presented by 2 colleagues from CIIS. At top is Denise Boston. She is the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion Dean of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at CIS. And that's a recent, and below her in the image is Sean Stefan Bell. He's a current student in the Master's in Counseling Psychology program at CIIS, and they co-presented into psychotherapy. One of the things that we strive to do for all of the workshops when possible was to have both a male and female presenter. And so we wanted to, because there aren't as many Black men in the field of Black psychology and psychology generally, we really wanted to make sure that there was a male presence co-presenting at as many of the workshops as we could. And so as you'll see moving forward, we always have at least 2 presenters, sometimes more, and we try to get a really nice gender dynamic as well, and perspectives. So next slide. Our third workshop in the series, as I mentioned, was on Black African-centered expressive arts therapy. And this was one of our most well-received of the workshops thus far. It was a 3-hour workshop. It was very dynamic. We had both slides presentations that talked about the theoretical underpinnings and perspectives on expressive arts therapy and its application. We had, if any of you were at the convention in, where was convention? I can't even remember where convention was right now. If anyone was at the last convention, you had an opportunity to attend Dr.'s workshop on Sakujeri Dance Collective, you know how dynamic her presentation was and is. And as I mentioned previously, Adisa did a piece around the drum and how drum can be utilized for healing. So that was a really, really fun and dynamic workshop. It was a 3-hour one. Most of the rest of them run about 2 hours, but this one was a bit longer because of all of the activities that we included. Next slide. This was our most recent workshop, and it was on liberatory practices of community mental health. And one of the images that I showed earlier was from this workshop. One thing that I want to point out too is you'll notice that they're at different locations. And so each of these, because we have partnered with community-based organizations, we were able to hold the workshops in various locations. The Bay Area has 2 main sides to it. There's a bridge that connects San Francisco to what's referred to as the East Bay, and Oakland is located in the East Bay. And so we wanted to make sure that we offered workshops on both sides of the bridge. And so the first workshop was held at CIIS. The second workshop was also at CIS, just for the convenience of the presenters. Our third workshop was in West Oakland, at the West Oakland Youth Center. The fourth workshop was in San Francisco in the on Cesar Chavez Street at Rafiki Coalition, which is one of our partner organizations. Next slide. Our next workshop is happening. Oops, I think you skipped one. Go back one. Oops, the other way. There we go. Almost. There we go. Yes, our next workshop is a panel discussion on careers in public mental health, and that one will be held in Oakland at the Health and Human Resource Education Center. This one's going to be really interesting in that it's made up of 6 people. We have an African-American couple, married couple, who provide consulting services around community mental health. And we have 2 people from our leadership cohort that are going to be talking about the impact of their participation in the cohort and in the project on their choices around their careers in public mental health. And then we also have 2 members of the general public that have, it's a couple, a husband and wife, that have been so faithful and have not missed a single workshop. They live quite a ways out, and they go to work all day, and they drive in no matter where we are, and attend the series of workshops. And so we're going to have them also present and talk about the impact of participating in this series on their careers. Okay, next slide. And finally, we close out with a Black Psychology Symposium. I'm really, really excited and somewhat nervous about the Black Psychology Symposium. Our leadership cohort participants are the presenters. So they are coming up with the theme. They are deciding what the presentation selection process will be, what the presentations will be. They will manage the day. They are in charge of the entire symposium. And so we meet about twice a month and do symposium planning. We've formed several committees. Those committees include a sacred committee where they will be, we're calling it the spiritual care committee. Oftentimes when you have these kinds of symposiums, lots of different things come up for people. And so we'll have a cohort of people who are tasked specifically to monitor the room and to serve as spiritual support for folks in the room. We have an altar committee. And then you're also your more traditional folks taking care of registration and those types of things. So I'm really, really excited about this. It's currently unfolding, and probably by the end of this month, we will have our themes set, and we will have our presentation outline in place. So I'm a little bit nervous to see how this turns out. But we've got a great group of folk in our cohort, so I'm excited about it. Next slide. So the project is administered by basically two of us, primarily myself and Lanisha. I serve as the project coordinator, and Lanisha Cately is the community outreach assistant. I spend probably between 5 to 6 hours a week working on this project. It's a mini grant, and so we were given about $12,000 to do the project. A very, very small amount of that money comes to us for compensation for our time. And the majority of that money, I believe almost half of it, is going to pay out stipends for the 20 participants, leadership participants. And we also have an advisor, Danielle Drake, who we check in with about once a month, just to ask questions and get support around things. And then we have Denise Boston, who's the grant administrator, and she signs off on the check request, and she signs off on the grants and those types of things. So as I mentioned, the funding was provided by the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, which is an institutional member of the Association of Black Psychologists, is the lead organization. And we partner with the Bay Area Association of Black Psychologists, Rafiki Coalition of Health and Human Resources, and the Health and Human Resource Education Center are our three partner organizations. And next slide. So that's basically an overview of the project. And so I'm here to answer any questions. I think we have about 10 minutes or so for questions.
Hey, thank you so much, Adiba. Thanks so much, Adiba. We really, really appreciate it. Again, I was so excited to hear about the things going on in the Bay Area chapter. Kathy is on the chat room, so we're looking to see if there are any questions or anything like that coming from folks. Just to keep in mind, there's a little bit of a latency period, so I think folks are seeing things about 20 to 30 seconds behind the real time. So please feel free to jump in. I am going to go ahead and move to Dr. Cartman from Chicago, and we'll hear him. And he is on the line now, so we will move there. But as you're going along, please feel free to throw in your questions, and we will keep this party rolling. Hey, Dr. Cartman, you are on the line now.
What's going on, family?
What's going on? All right, I'm going to pull up your slides. If you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get you squared away.
Sounds good. My name is Dr. Obari Cartman. Coming from Chicago. I am been president of Chicago chapter for about half a year. Been active with this chapter since I moved back home. I'm from Chicago. Since I moved back home right before the national conference was in Chicago. So been relatively active since then. Been a member of ABPsi since I was at Hampton University. We are preparing for our monthly community forum right now, so forgive the moving around. Also did not realize we were on Eastern time, so I think I'm probably also late, so forgive me for that too. So that's
All right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're ready to get you started. I got your slides ready. So whenever you want to jump in, we'll go ahead and get that rolling.
Let me see if I can find an outlet right here. So my goal for the year was to, I'll go back a little bit actually, hold on. The thing that I've been most, I think, useful for since my time organizing and building with Chicago chapter has been connecting the mental health folk, grassroots organizing folks in Chicago, artists, just the wide, vast array of interdisciplinary Black Chicagoans who are interested in mental health, who are interested in uplifting and encouraging Black people, who are interested in education. And, you know, I've always, part of this is because my own personal background as an artist myself, as an activist myself. I've been struggling in my own personal career development and integrating my different aspects of self. In school, you go in, you got to pick a major. And then, you know, from kids, they ask what you want to be when you grow up, you got to pick a thing. But in my lived experience has been, I am all of these things. I'm a photographer, I'm a father, all these things are who I am. And it works to my advantage as a psychologist, as a therapist, as an educator, because I get to pull in all of these different skill sets, talents, aspects of self. And so I wanted to represent that organizationally. And so from the beginning of when I was helping me and Sharon Bethia and Dr. Rabiatu Berry were instrumental in planning the national conference in Chicago. And the goal a lot was just that, was to connect the spiritual communities, the Nation of Islam, the artists, the spoken word artists, the rappers, the institution builders here in Chicago, to bring them to ABPsi. And so ever since then, that has been my role in the organization. When I was tasked with organizing a meeting for the last several years, you know, not even as president, but just as a member, as a board member, I would always try to go through my networks to see who's doing work that is not necessarily psychology necessarily, but connected to the upliftment of Black people from a cultural lens, from a comprehensive, holistic lens. And so that's what I wanted to focus on this year. Once they asked me to be president and I accepted that decision, that role, I figured that that's what they wanted from me, was to do what I continue to do. And so this year has been a representation of that unfolding and expanding and growing. So the first slide you see is the first thing we did, the launch of our 2017-2018 season. And it was a mental health mixer. So it was an all call for social workers, for counselors, marriage and family counselors, for teachers, whoever is interested in mental health, Black people, to come out, to mix and mingle. You can go to the next slide. This is that room. We were in a Black-owned, community space called the Quarry on the South Side. There's a liquor store across the street. It's a high crime area, so we're in the hood wherever we at, because that's where people are. So that's where we go. Next slide. I'm gonna go through this pretty quick too. And so that event moved right from that mixer from 7 to or 6 or whatever the time, 5 to 7, and then from 7 to 9 we had a film showing. It was a film. A social worker who moved to Oakland, when she was living here, she did a documentary about taking some bucket boys. If you see, some drive that past most major intersections in Chicago, you'll see some young Black men just out there playing buckets like drums, and getting money, getting paid for that service. And she saw there was the social worker saw those boys and said she made the connection between what they were doing and West African percussion, and fundraised and organized a whole sort of like cultural rites of passage trip to take them over to Senegal, and made a documentary out of it. And so we showed that documentary in collaboration with the ABPsi and some other organizations, and had a panel and have a discussion about the integration again between mental health and arts and culture, and what this symbolic film represented, and the task of all of us to take our young people back to Africa, literally or psychologically, and what that journey entails. And so we had that film, showed that film, had a discussion with some trauma therapists, with the filmmakers and the directors of the film were there. One of the Bucket Boys who was featured in the film came. We had some artists, so it was just an intergenerational, interdisciplinary conversation just to kick off the year, to set the tone for what we were about. And we've been doing that ever since. So go to the next film. Next slide. This is that room for that film, in the same space, just the next door over. Next slide. So this is our first official, board chapter meeting, and the aim for the year really, again, we have been, for the last couple of years, struggling to keep people engaged. We'll have a high turnout for the very first meeting, for the first, what we call our first Harambe for the year, after we take a summer break. And then people will come and they're interested, but then they will not stay consistently, it seems. And what we noticed, the trend was that people would come not just for a regular chapter meeting, but would come if the topic, or if the speaker that day, or if the panel discussion seemed interesting to them. So people seem to be motivated by topics, right? And so they wouldn't come to just a ABPsi meeting just to know there's a bunch of Black psychologists coming, students or professionals. They would come to hear about suicide prevention, or the licensing process, whatever it was the topic was. And so we've been focused a lot this year on trying to get a sense of what the topics that people wanted to come hear about and speak about and have discussions about. And the format has been less about like membership structure and fundraising. I'm personally not that good at that kind of stuff. I'm really good at curating conversations. I have a wide network of people. And so they really have been monthly community forums more so than meetings. I've been calling them that even. Monthly community forums to reestablish ABPsi's name in the Chicago networks as a place to go talk about Black mental health and a range of topics connected to that. And so the beginning of that was this meeting, the psychology of resistance. So we brought in some young activists. A professor from Chicago State did a piece about COINTELPRO. And then we had a sister from Houston who was in town who started the Melanin and Mental Health movement. She was on it too. So we're just, again, just in general. Yeah, we see them. Thanks.
Need more chairs than this?
I'm gonna wait until see if we need them. We'll come find you.
Then you take these and then we'll bring this up to the auditorium.
That works.
They got more chairs up there.
Okay. sorry about that. We got a meeting at 1, so I'm also preparing for that. So this is the first meeting. Again, great dialogue. The rooms have been full every time. That's the thing that I think has been working about the approach this year, and not, trying to start with memberships, trying to start with but just positioning ourselves, saying there's the ABPsi's here. We care about a bunch of stuff. We connect to a bunch of people. We know that the city is buzzing. We know that there's lots of problems in Chicago that people all around the world know about, violence to corruption to school closings, and that we have a unique position to facilitate conversations about this, and to begin with the conversations, but then ultimately move to interventions and structures and institutions. But to begin right now, we just want to have community conversations to let you know, to increase our visibility, to increase our email list, to just start recruiting, to just start advertising who we are and what we're about, just by doing these monthly community forums. So this is the first one, Psychology of Resistance. The next one, next slide. The next month we did something about Black male mental health. So if this video plays, they can actually show you the room some. Technology is amazing. So there's no sound on this from my end of it. I don't know if y'all can hear that or not.
I was taught that you don't. The Chicago Association of Black Psychologists put on an uncensored, unfiltered, all-out discussion about what they say is a cause for concern in the Black community. That is, Black males and their mental health. I was taught that you don't need to have emotions because you're a man and you're a woman. Don't cry, whatever, suck it up.
The first step is education. Symptoms and triggers. 98% of this country has mental health issues. They just go untreated.
Mental health amongst Black males, some say it's an issue. That's why Dr. Abari Cartman decided to hold an intimate discussion about it at the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner Studies. Doesn't fill the room and lend a close ear to the things that were being said, things like how some Black males struggle with expressing their emotions.
Whatever you feel, you keep it to yourself. You don't share that because you're not a man. Men don't share their feelings.
Richard Badger says males have been conditioned to suppress their emotions from day one.
You as a boy, me as a boy, we always grew up where if you were hurting, you couldn't reveal it. And unfortunately, that's still kind of the paradigm today.
The discussion also paid particular attention to another sensitive topic, domestic violence.
Police say Harvey fatally stabbed Juliet, then jumped to his death from her apartment building.
I have been a victim of domestic violence, not once but twice. Both times I ended up in jail.
Laverne Badger, Richard's wife, was a victim of domestic violence for 13 years. She says domestic violence is slowly killing the Black community, and a conversation needs to be had.
It's just a silent killer. It's something that's affecting our community, our kids, generation after generation. But if we don't discuss it, then there's no solution.
Solutions that Dr. Cartman is trying to solve, which is why he says it's important to bring people together to get various perspectives and to attack the issues at hand.
I think that without clear conversations, that you can be moving fast in the wrong direction, right? So I think there's something about having the intellects and scholars and the visionaries and the people that are thinking deeply about these issues come together and share what we've learned to then direct the steps so that the action steps are meaningful, are targeted, or directed, or organized amongst themselves.
And as we heard from the discussion, there were a lot of things that were being brought to the forefront. And Dr. Cartman told me that's exactly what he wanted, because how could the community move forward if they don't address the issues? At the Carruthers Center, Montez Allen, Urban Broadcast Media.
Okay, next slide. So this was, and so, I mean, what's been happening as we've been seeming to hit the issues that people want to speak about is that, people come out, the media comes out, this is a young Black media company, Urban Black Broadcast Media or something. People are really excited about the forums and the discussions, and just to note there are Black people having these discussions. This is an image from that room. We had a round table with the men in the circle in the front, and then concentric circles coming from outside of it. So you can keep going. Next slide. The other thing that we did around the same time, the month, this is probably November, we were starting to collaborate with a couple of organizations. One, Sister Afia, is an organization started by a sister named Kamisha Jones. So the young millennial, suffers from bipolar, social work background. And she had the idea and asked us to help support her idea to do a whole Black mental wellness weekend on Veterans Day weekend. And we had 100 seminars across the city, South Side, West Side. We had a film screening. We had mixers, again, for clinicians, for people to come meet clinicians. But we wanted to make sure it wasn't just like the typical panel discussion-y kind of mental health conversation. So there was a lot of stuff around movement, Reiki, yoga, Tai Chi. I did a couple pieces around the hip hop and therapy I do. And again, it was really, it got a lot of media attention. People were excited again about just the psychologists coming together, the mental health folk coming together to share our resources. Everything was free. Every people donated their spaces. So it was really just starting to get a sense that people are wanting this and are willing to sacrifice for it and come together for it. And so this is just another moment towards that same trajectory. Next slide. A part of that weekend just coincided with our monthly. So we meet every second Saturdays in the room that I'm in right now. So this is that next one. We had Black Women's Mental Health panel, as a counterpart to the Black Men's piece, and it was cross-listed with the Mental Health Weekend. So this is that room. A brilliant panel, psychiatrists, social workers, and psychologists, and the same kind of thing, and just community comes out. They keep coming out because we keep giving them something that I think they're looking for. So next slide. This is I think the last community forum we had. This was around our Kwanzaa celebration. And one of the things that I'll speak to that I think has been keeping people engaged is that we're having conversations that are digging deep, that are asking difficult questions. So even this one where we're talking about Kwanzaa, we're talking about, Nguzo Saba and culture and African-centered pedagogy in general, but doing it from a perspective that's not just, I'll say corny, I'll say like, not saying the same stuff, not just to feel good. This is all amazing, but like we're getting into some of the difficult, like the nuances of the conversation. People are expecting that, right? So we're not just, we talked about Kwanzaa, but we also talked about the difficulties of separating a Karanga from Kwanzaa. We talked about if the what seems to be a difficulty for people that are new to African-centered thought who have questions. I've had young people ask me questions like, if Africa was so great, then why did it fall? Then how are we losing so bad, right? And so to talk about the principles of African-centered psychology, but also to talk about how do we merge colonialism? How do we look at the white Jesuses and when we visit Africa, like the difficult stuff. And so that's I think the reputation that we're starting to get is that we have sensitive topics and we come at them from angles that are critical, and we're picking apart, pulling stuff together, and it's not really just like teachy and preachy, but like we're having real discussions in there. So that happened at our Kwanzaa celebration, and I think the people were really encouraged and inspired and learned something from that. So that was the last one we had. The next one. The other thing that we've been involved with is creating a directory of mental health providers in Chicago. It just went live just maybe 2 days ago. You can go to the next slide just to get a sense of what it looks like. Wait, go back real quick. I'm sorry. The thing that's really dope about being able to talk about this stuff is there's that image in the background. And okay, I'll insert right here that one of the things that I'm proud of about what's been happening this year is that it feels good to serve the city and the organization in this way. I will not say that I feel like I've been a good servant, of ABPsi in the city. I don't feel like I've been a good leader, though, and we can talk about that if there's time. I say that because I have not been very good at delegating any of this stuff. And so when you see all of the flyers, that's me. The typing in the email list, that's me. Sending out messages, it's all me. Organizing the panels, moderating the panels, like it's been very me-centered so far in a way that is not sustainable, in a way that does not draw on and motivate the different talents and time and resources that other people may have. In the times when I'll put a call out and say, who wants to help with this? And then if it'll happen, I'll do it. People in leadership positions understand that pressure and that dynamic, but it took me a long time to design this website, right? And to input all of the directories. So this is an image. This is the picture behind it is a picture that I took at ABPsi National, maybe New Orleans, no, Indianapolis, I think. So I was drumming at the morning ancestor circle, and I just, again, doing too much. I'm drumming, and then I stopped in the middle of my drumming, took a picture of two hands being clasped in the middle of the morning's ancestor circle, and I just love that image. So like I'm using my own personal images for the stuff and designing and stuff, and it's very tedious in a way that again is not good leadership, I would argue, but that's where we are right now. Next slide. So this is just the directory. So it looks like it's maybe about 50 entries so far. On my Facebook, where I could probably get maybe 150 people just from the people that were interested. I think the people were waiting to see it, to know that it's a real thing. So ever since yesterday, we're gonna start circulating it just a little bit internally. I think we'll get a lot more entries, but I think there could easily be a list of 150 Black social workers, counselors, diviners, right? It's holistic in a way that we're asking for providers of healing and care that aren't licensed necessarily or not traditional psychotherapy in the same way. You can see that in the mission a little bit. Next slide. Just a little bit about what this is about. Again, just in the spirit of collaboration, Chicago ABPsi. I've been talking a lot with the president of the Chicago Association of Black Social Workers, Bador Moore. He's come to our events. I go to his events, so we're just talking about collaborating more. There's a community of African American mental health professionals. It's a group of older, mostly Black women. It's a small group, but they've been around for a while. I'm also part of a wellness committee for the Black Lives Matter movement here in Chicago. And then Sister Afia, again, are the organizations that, again, on paper are collaborating to make this directory, but it's really just been me, which will, as it expands, as I delegate more, as people get more involved and get behind the momentum, like this thing could be much more robust and more powerful as this becomes real collaborations. So we're just at the beginning of all of that. Again, one of the features we talk about is that the directory includes an expanded understanding of mental health that includes spiritual, physical, political, ancestral, nutritional, and other aspects of wellness. So the directory reflects that. The next slide. And then the last page will be just some resources. So these are all links to, the associations page, the Black Social Workers page, Sister Afia. And I'm gonna put in some articles just for like self-care kind of stuff. It'll be just a random hodgepodge of resources as it develops. This is just the beginning of it. And next slide. And this is today. So we are all up to date. This is the forum that is about to happen in a half an hour. One of my panelists just walked in the room, is looking at me, wondering what I'm doing. And again, just some of the topics are just topics based on things that I have, in my network, expertise in, or people that are doing work in, and some of it came from a survey. Every time I send an email out, I ask people what people want to talk about or hear about. So we incorporate the topics that the people are giving us that comes up in our discussions, and we try to create forums based on it. The next one is going to, the February forum is going to be on queer mental health. And again, I want it to be a conversation that's not like pandery, that's not you know, necessarily a safe space so that we can just be nice and sweet. But I really wanted all of our forums, even the ones around stuff that's really important to me, I wanted to dig in, to like ask difficult questions, to be a safe space for honest conversation. And that's what we're going to continue to do. The next phase of my vision for the organization is to move from, you know, just gathering the momentum of getting our name out there, getting the rooms full, to moving towards having more structure in our membership, thinking about what it means to have interventions, to do, you know, emancipation circles, if that's what we decide to do, to be in schools. All of that will require much more, you know, meetings. So we're having forums now, but we need to start to have more meetings. And we're at a good place, I think, to start to transition into doing that. So that is where we are. I think that's my last slide. Yep. So, any questions? Could everybody hear me clearly? Mumble sometimes.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. So we have, I'm looking at the chat room, a lot of positive feedback from the folks for both the Bay Area and for Chicago. Dr. Moore and Brittany Griffin, we got some students in there. So a bunch of folks just sort of commenting on the great work. The chat room is open. So if you have any questions, please let us know. And we will, Dr. Carvin, I believe, has to go. So whatever feedback, we'll be able to pass that along. But just from what I'm reading right now, thank you so much. And just really great work. Ethiopia says, nice work, Brother Obari. We do need to move away from the myth of safe to realization of developing trusting settings for courageous conversations.
Right. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to transition to Dr. Robinson. Again, thank you so much. We will put all of this stuff up. It'll be on the site so people can follow up with you or review the materials you submitted so we can keep the conversation going.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you, bro.
All right. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm getting ready to transition to St. Louis. So just one, we had a change. As you all know, we've been working through the technology and trying to get it squared away. But we're used to difficulty. We're used to challenges. So we're going to push on ahead. Dr. Robinson is going to go now, and she's going to tell us about the great things going on in St. Louis. Dr. Robinson, are you on?
Hey,
Yeah.
Auntie.
I've never seen you anywhere. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We got you. We can hear you, and I'm getting ready to put up your slides.
Okay.
Just a second.
Awesome work, by the way, with this technology.
All right, you're on, you're live, and you're in charge.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Robinson. I'm a member of the St. Louis chapter of ABPsi. And so I just want to speak briefly about some community work that we have been engaged in for a couple years, but it's really picked up a lot of traction, a lot of attention. And so we're really proud of the work that we're doing in the lives that we're saving. So looks like the slides went away. There we go. So in St. Louis, we've had some challenges, I guess that would be putting it mildly, with an increase of shootings, an increase of homicides. And what's more concerning to us in the city is that the majority of these conflicts are predictable. They stem from the fractured community that we have, the torn fabric of our neighborhoods. And so we've just been really looking at how do we reclaim our streets. So there is a organization that we work with called Better Family Life, who asked us to join them. And so the majority of the work that I do is with Mr. James Clark, who's the VP of their community outreach. And so right now it's myself and Dr. Gladys Smith that does the majority of the work with this gun violence program that Better Family Life has created. So I'll open it up with the short media clip that one of our local news stations put together a few days ago. So if you want to go to the next slide, we'll watch that first.
My son, he had got into an altercation to where the other individual tried to hurt him through gun violence.
Conflicts normally are brewing. Until now, people did not have a place to go to share the information on the conflict and have a system in place to de-escalate the conflicts.
I didn't know what to do, so I called Better Family Life, and Mr. Clark answered, and he came to my house within like 15, 20 minutes that day. As he stepped in, he worked with the other individual, and he worked with my son, and he de-escalated the situation. He de-escalated it so quickly, so fast, to where it just didn't seem real.
We're not looking for who's right and who's wrong. That's really not important.
Better Family Life and the work that we do helps them to say, okay, there's an alternative where you can still be respected. You can make a better choice and still, be around to be with your family. Just the idea of just losing that child that you carry, you love, watch grow, to become a young man, I couldn't. I could not. I know I wouldn't be able to survive. So I am so grateful that they were able to rescue us from the tragedy that could have happened.
I had a confrontation with a female I used to talk to. Okay. And the baby daddy didn't like it, busted windows out, made threats towards me. I told him I'd kill him. Better Family Life stepped in. He called these guys and they contacted me. Mr. Clark calmed me on not doing stuff to him, to where I end up back in penitentiary. It's not no good. It's not worth it. So I had to become a better man to leave it alone.
We are literally saving lives. And so there's nothing better than having a conversation with someone who you recognize is very much enraged, but they allow you just a second of their time because they want to make a better choice. And so from having that discussion, we're able to do that.
Because I know me personally, I'll probably be in jail.
Two of my daughters actually got into a conflict with someone else, and it turned into gun violence outside my house.
It gives an option that individuals thought never would be possible.
So commercial came on again on the radio when I was headed to the problem, and I called Mr. Clark immediately. He gave us suggestions on how to stay safe for the night, and me and my daughters came to talk to him 9 o'clock the very next morning.
This is a front-end solution.
By that night, it was solved. We were hugging and talking, and even now when we see each other in the street, I noticed that my daughters nod at the other girls, like, I see you, and it's no problem.
Our son had gotten into some trouble, and he was actually, trying, some people out here trying to kill him. They tried twice. Regina, my wife, she suggested that we call Mr. Clark and see if there's anything that he could do. There's no de-escalating the situation. So the next step was to see if we could get him out of St. Louis.
Eventually, the violence will stop.
I really appreciate everything that Better Family Life and Mr. Clark has done for us. Nothing like sitting in the living room with a grandmother whose grandson is involved in the conflict, and to see his whole demeanor change, knowing that his grandmother is now weighing in on it. So it's a very spirit-led program, but it cuts right to the heart of the matter.
Okay, so basically, what that clip does is give a very brief synopsis of the gun violence de escalation program. So, what happened is it all started with a few years back. Mr. Clark, the man featured in the video, created these yard signs that said, "We must stop killing each other." And so he had maybe a couple hundred. And within 5 minutes, they started getting phone calls because other people wanted to have the same signs in their yard. And so now it's one of the biggest yard sign campaigns in St. Louis. And you can see these signs all over the place. So what led from that was he got a phone call from a grandmother that was saying, I understand we must stop killing each other, but, I know someone right now that's trying to kill my grandson. What do I do? And oftentimes in these situations, our youth, especially in St. Louis, don't feel necessarily comfortable going to the police because, you may call them for help and end up being the victim. So our community was really searching for a culturally competent and responsive way of de-escalating conflicts in a way where it wasn't the police showing up with guns drawn. So Mr. Clark took on a couple phone calls, and what he did was he got a hold of the major players involved, which meant he called grandmothers, he called mothers, he called fathers, he called best friends. He got the community or the village involved. And by doing that, they were able to reach the two people in conflict and be able to make more sense of it. That was successful, but what he realized very early on within these first three cases was that there was a very strong mental health component that he was not necessarily well versed or knew how to work with. And so that's why he reached out to the St. Louis chapter of ABPsi, because we have established a very good reputation in the community for our mental health efforts. And so we got involved that way. I think one of his first cases was a young man who had a bipolar disorder. And so knowing how to connect them with different community resources, even knowing what questions to ask when you're doing these interviews was a valuable resource that we brought to the table. And so that began the collaboration. 4 centers were open throughout St. Louis. In 4 different parts of St. Louis City and County. And basically what happens is there were these PSA announcements on the radio, they ran in newspapers, where if you know of a conflict or you know of a beef that's brewing, call us. We don't get the police involved. We'll keep it confidential and we'll find a way to get the beef or the conflict de-escalated in a rapid manner that allows everybody to still be respected but walk away alive. And so I manned one of the centers. Dr. Gladys Smith was at another center. And so we literally would have phone calls coming in. We would schedule these interviews on a Tuesday. One of the parties would come in either with the individual or it would be a grandparent. And we would literally do the entire clinical interview. And so not only in the interview are we listening for who the adversary is, how did this start, if there's been gunfire involved or not, but we're listening for other keywords like people not sleeping, people having bad appetites, people being in and out of jail, people having family histories of mental illness, things that we are trained to pick up on because we want to also address the mental health needs of the community as well. So it's been very successful. Better Family Life has gotten a very, very, very large grant to expand the program. So now it's down to 2 centers, but the centers are open full time. And if you go to the next slide, we can see a little bit of the stats just from 2017 or 2016 alone. So we had 56 hotline calls that came in. So that means it was people that just called in and said, hey, I know someone who's been shot at. He's going out to try to kill these people. I don't want to get involved, but, someone else needs to step in before this goes too far. We ended up scheduling 35 interviews. So that would be an interview with a clinician like myself or Dr. Gladys Smith, where we sit down one of the individuals or the parties and we go through a full interview of the conflict, 31 of them required home visits. Some cases we were, they may have been very hostile, where it resulted to us just having to relocate an individual. In some cases, if that's what's best, that's what we'll do. If we need to make home visits, we do that as well. I can tell you, right around Thanksgiving, Mr. Clark called me up about a case with a young man who had a mental illness, felt he didn't need his medication anymore, was threatening to go out and basically attempt suicide by cop. And so in those cases where it's a hotline call that comes in and it's very contentious, I literally at 9 o'clock at night, got myself together, dropped my son off at my mom's, and we both headed down into the city to try to de-escalate this case. It was successful. We ended up getting the young man to agree to go inpatient, where we got him back stable on meds and educated the family on medication, the needs for medication, what bipolar looks like, and kind of like dealing with the whole stigma of mental health. But that was a case where it was successful in that we got him the mental health services he needed and also educated the family. So a lot of times we end up referring individuals for more intensive psychological exams. We may refer individuals to drug treatment. There's always employment training offered to each individual involved in these cases. There's also legal assistance that's offered by by Better Family Life. And then there's some other things, like if we need to do talk to landlords about working with someone's rent while they take time off from work to deal with these matters, or if we need to relocate families. They also have a program called Amnesty, where 3 or 4 times a year, if you have warrant in the city or the county of St. Louis, you come to them and you can get this amnesty paper where they work with the courts to have the warrants lifted. And then they bargain to drop a lot of the cost so that people can get these warrants lifted so they can get a license back. They're able to get employment, and it just helps the process move along. So there's a lot of psychosocial supports that come along on the back end when we de-escalate cases. Next slide. Okay, so Better Family Life has a lot of different, they have a lot of different, different programs. So they have one that's called the Pulpit to Porches, where they are going out into the community. So they work with local area churches. They may have deacons, they may have the preachers themselves. They go door to door, canvassing neighborhoods, and are figuring out what people need. The whole premise of their program is to go outside the traditional walls of social services, and they target the most high crimed areas, impoverished areas, where the goal is to simply meet the community and meet the needs where they are. So, they may do an intake standing in a doorway. Do you need daycare assistance? Does anyone in the household have warrants that they need help with? Is anyone interested in any type of employment program? So it's very hands-on, it's very front doors. And again, it's just, it's been a great partnership, because a lot of times I may come across a family, and it's happened before, where they're doing an intake at someone's door, and the children may have, someone may have an autism diagnosis, or someone's not speaking, but the family doesn't know what to do, but they don't trust the local hospital. So they'll call one of us up on the phone and say, what can we do? How can we refer them? How can we get them seen? And so it's been a very, definitely a very rewarding program. We enjoy the work that we do with Better Family Life, especially the de-escalation portions of what we do, because we, like I said in the video, we literally are saving lives. I can't tell you how many cases where there was already gunplay involved. One person shot at someone else, they shot back, they went hunting down to get someone, And somewhere along the line, a girlfriend, a mother, a friend thought enough to give us a call, where we were able to get involved and stop one of these individuals from becoming the next hashtag or the next statistic. So there's a lot of mentoring programs. They have open drug market programs where they partner with drug agencies. We do a lot of those clinical intakes as well, where, you know, we go on the strolls where the prostitutes are, where, you know, drugs are being sold. And, you know, every once in a while you'll have somebody who is willing to change their life, and they are willing to go into drug rehab immediately. So the whole takeaway from the presentations that we do when we go out and we talk about this together is that we encourage neighborhoods to be willing to take a deeper dive. You'll often hear Mr. Clark saying that, you know, there's a lot that we can learn from textbooks, but you can learn even more from the streets. And so taking that deeper dive means they and we meaning ABPsi, have an established reputation in our community for going door to door, from being in the community and just not waiting on people to come to the office, but we take the office to them. And so having that commitment to saving our communities is just, you know, what we've been about. And so, of course, that requires you to have a major engagement in Neighborhood Alliance, meeting people, going to all the community events, those that are outdoors, indoors, at the schools, at the churches, wherever they have them, and just making sure that the community knows who you are. And so I think that is it as far as my slides go, in talking about the work that we're doing in the community. And I did want to save time for any questions, but what I will also say is that we were talking about EECs earlier, and I've had an amazing time being able to actually implement some EEC circles. One in particular we have within the VA. So the work that the St. Louis chapter is doing is we're branching out and trying to do what we can do. So we're working with our veterans as well. We're holding EECs, and that work's been extremely successful as well. So.
Wow, thank you so much. That was exactly what I was hoping to see. I actually sat in on this presentation at the Houston convention, and I was so taken aback by it. Just an amazing and critical thing. I just want to read some of the comments that we've gotten in here. Again, Ethiopia is chiming in quite a bit about maybe that this may be something that St. Louis might develop and write up as a blueprint, or at least sort of establish the outline so other chapters might be able to adopt it and implement it. I know that there are other violence intervention projects going on around the country that, you know, may look a little different, but this may be one of the only ones, at least one of the ones that I know of, that ABPsi is expressly involved in. So that was one comment. And also sort of the opportunity to just sort of a general comment for chapters to engage in this kind of way, to share ideas and help everyone accomplish some of the work. Folks are saying great work. They love what you've presented. I think Adiba is still on as well, and I'm not sure if Abari is. Adiba, if you're on, you can come into the room as well. Just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to see our panel. And if you have any comments in the chat, you can go ahead and say that in the chat room. I'll read them, and our presenters can speak.
I did want to say in response to the write-up piece, we have been looking at how to write that up. Since it was the brainchild of Mr. Clark with Better Family Life, what we've done is to kind of help with the writing piece, but in wanting to respect it being their brainchild, have been waiting on them to do their initial write-up first. But they have certainly given us permission to write it in a way that we can share this with other chapters. And because there is no other gun violence de-escalation program like it, they've agreed that when they look at the next 2 to 3 cities where they start to sprout this, they only want to host it in cities that have ABPsi chapters. So the goal is that when we spread this program, that there will always be a connection to an ABPsi chapter. So we're happy about that.
Excellent, excellent. Great stuff. I'm just standing by for any questions or comments folks may have. Mama Huberta is still on as well. You can feel free to chime in. Adiba, did you have any closing comments or thoughts?
I wanted to, yeah, as I was listening to some of the other speakers present, I wanted to really highlight the importance of, which I think is the through line through all of this, is the connection to community and thinking beyond just the construct of the academy and clinical settings. And so I think the thing that runs through all of our presentations is our collaboration with community and our emphasis on bringing more people into the fold as healers, and not just thinking in terms of, are you a licensed clinician? Are you a counseling psychologist, a social worker, and so forth? And so I'm really appreciating the consistency of that across all of our presentations and the work that we're doing, whether they're rooted specifically through a chapter or universities and what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all, you know, our people are sort of facing a lot of similar challenges, and I personally think ABPsi has a perspective that is not just professional, but it's also passionate, and we bring all those things to bear to try to play our part, play our role in our community's healings and well-being.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that on the chat somebody mentioned student circles, so I wanted to comment on that in particular, because even though I'm I guess you would call me a non-traditional student, because I do have my AARP card, I'm technically also a student. And you know, I began my life in ABPsi as a young person in my 20s. You know, a couple of decades ago. And it was Dr. Mama Huberta mentioned at the beginning in her remarks around the importance of jegnaship. And so one of the things that I would like to talk about, and again, mentioning, sort of reflecting back to the project that I'm doing, it's all rooted in jegnaship, and it's all rooted in the student experience and how important it is to engage with students. And again, reflecting on the connecting with community. I am not a therapist. I'm not a counseling psychologist. I don't have any degrees in psychology. And so I came to ABPsi back in the 80s as a young woman who'd experienced domestic violence, who had a suicide attempt from postpartum depression, who was trying to figure out who I was in the world as a young Black woman. And it was through jegnaship relationships with Black women teachers at a local community college in San Diego that literally saved my life and introduced me to Black psychology. And so over the ensuing 30 years, I've dedicated my life to an understanding and a commitment to African-centered psychology. And so for me, ABPsi has always been deeply personal. It's always been life-saving, and it's been the foundation of my sense of self and identity in the world. So when I did, so no matter what work I was doing, whether I was working in financial services or working in the nonprofit sector, or now working in more an educational academic arena, the through line again has always been ABPsi and jegnaship. And so again, when I think about the Association of Black Psychologists and specifically how we developed this project, it was really rooted in the understanding that African-centered psychology is for everyone. And it's not this limited thing that is for people in a specific narrow field. And I think that that's what's being emphasized through all of our presentations. that it is for all of us as African people, beginning, as Mama Huberta pointed out, for the liberation of the African mind and the restoration of the African spirit. And so I always emphasize to people, you know, this is for all of us. This is for us to not just to deal with trauma and to be in some sort of responsive, you know, mode, but it is for us to thrive and to, and to live in a full African way.
Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Adiba. I really, really appreciate it. I want to give Dr. Robinson a final opportunity, and then we'll do some wrap up. It's about 2 o'clock my time, East Coast time, and then we'll, after Dr. Robinson, I'll get some final things, and then we'll be good. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. It absolutely requires our students. I started in ABPsi as a student, and, you know, telling, you know, the board and everyone that will listen, count us two as equals. So I wouldn't dare not think of never having students at every part of this venture. I'm grateful that students have been able to create this platform so that we can have this meeting virtually. So yeah, it definitely involves students. And I would definitely love to see a broadening of how our EECs are impacting the spaces where we live. I don't think we have enough communication or feedback about that. So I'm really looking forward to that at the convention. But anyone who's interested in the model that I presented today with Better Family Life, we are more than happy to do the more in-depth, longer version of the presentation. Feel free to send me emails or questions if you have any for me. And I'm just, you know, glad I was able to be a part of the mid-year.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So again, this is sort of our first opportunity, our first tryout with engaging chapters in this way. We had some technological challenges, but as I mentioned earlier, we are people who are accustomed to challenges. So we push on, we work through it, and it turned out excellent. So thank you all so much. I'm looking at a comment from Anthony Williams that says, "Great work, everybody. I've been listening since the beginning." And just figured out how to chat. So we're excited about that people are engaging. So it's on YouTube. It will be linked. It's a permanent link, so you can always come back here to review it with the slides and the notes and so on and so forth. We will look to do more things like this. Probably it'll be another couple months before we can put something else together. So keep on the lookout for our next event. The other thing is evaluation. I posted an evaluation form on the website where you registered. If you would go on there and just give us some feedback about how we did this and whatever constructive things you might have to share with us, and we will work to continue to make it better. I did ask Dr. Bethia and Dr. Erica Jennifer to hold off on their part of the presentation simply because there was some trouble getting into the Hangout session. And so we will have them to do their training part at another time, so be on the lookout for them. But I also want to thank them as well for their hard work, as well as the national office. So with that, again, that's it. Thank you all so much. We're going to go ahead and close out for the day. And if I don't see you again, I hope to see you in Oakland. Take care.